I'm going to be doing my second train spike knife. This is the first one. Made this at Warhorse Forge. That's a Veterans Outreach Program under the 19 Hands organization. And today I'm going to do this on my home forge. I'm going to have to straighten this one out a little bit. I'm going to try to draw it out a little more because there's a lot of handle here, very heavy in the handle, and not a lot of blade. So I'm going to try to draw this one out a little bit more before starting to bring that blade in and separate where the blade and handle are. So, here we go, knife number 2. Hello, denizens of YouTube. As you just heard in my intro there, I'm going to be making a railroad spike knife today. This is the second knife I've ever made. There it is in the forge. It takes a while to heat up because the stock is pretty thick, so we're going to have to give it a good amount of heats and hits to get it to a knife shape. The anvil is going to be cold at first, so it's going to absorb a lot of that heat at first, so your heat times, that the piece stays hot enough to hit, will be short at first, but it'll get longer as the anvil warms up and stops sucking all that heat out. You can see I'm using some flat jaw tongs here. They're not the greatest, but it's the only thing I have at the moment. I've got some much better tongs for this that I might make another third railroad spike video here come out soon, because this spike, as you can see, it's pretty curved. Now that I got it curved like that, so this was actually used in a railroad, and looks like it had a hard life in that railroad. It was bent as it pulled out. And just like when you hammer cold steel, when you bend cold steel, it causes stress fractures. So as you see as I work this, stress fractures are going to become evident. You can't see them now because it's a big thick hunk of steel, but when I start to draw this out and hammer in the bevel and then do the twist, you're definitely going to see where those stress fractures came into play. So drawing out is what I'm doing here, as well as straightening that out that bit. And you see I'm sweeping off the forge scale here, and that's an important thing to do, and sometimes I forget to do it, but one important concept to remember is that when you hit the piece with your hammer, the anvil is hitting back with equal force, the Newtonian physics. So you can see I heated up the end here. So I'm starting to draw out I probably should have started this. Draw out the handle area first and push all that steel down toward the tip. Now, as I was saying, the amp, and I drop it. It's not the first time. It's not going to be the last time. But if you leave that forge scale on there, it's going to leave impressions on your workpiece. So it's important to clean that off, and then I drop it again. Because I'm new at this. This is only the third thing I've forged, and second railroad spike I've forged total. So like I was saying, I should have started hammering at the base of the nail and drew that steel toward the tip. Because really the handle gets really heavy if you don't try to draw that out and thin it out some. You don't need all that steel in the handle, but you do need it in the blade to either make it longer or draw that bevel out longer, wider I should say. Oh, I got it nice and hot on this one, so this is going to be a nice hit, except when you get it really hot, that forge scale is really hot and falls off, and I just got it down my glove. I was rolling down the sleeves to make it shorter. That was a mistake. And it took me a second to realize that it was in there, and then the burn kept building, so I instinctively dropped the tongs, dropped the hammer, dropped the workpiece, so we had very hot metal on the ground there, and I had some dirt and grass that was smoldering there, and then my wife's watching me the entire time, and it was like, I knew exactly what happened just by watching her reaction. So now this has got a good bend in it. That's one thing. If you're hitting it on one side continually, the metal's going to want to start to bend. You got to have, it just takes experience to understand how the metal wants to move. And you can see I've drawn it out here. This is the end of my first session. It's as long as my first knife and much longer than a normal spike. So it's starting to move in the direction I want. So this is the start of my second session here. So I'm really just trying to draw this out and straighten it out, and then I'm going to start to hammer in the bevel a little bit. So as you can see, I'm hitting the one side there, trying to draw down that steel to hammer in the bevel. And that's to give it a good knife shape. Now, I've since gotten some tools like butcher tools and things like that I might be able to separate the handle and the blade material better. I didn't have any of that now, just tongs and a hammer. So I'm trying to do the best with what I have. I might try the butcher tool on the next one, just to see how it does. But you can see I'm getting a pretty good knife shape. It's really tapering down, so you can see how that edge is pretty thin now. So I've really got a good knife shape, and I think I'm happy with that shape. So as you can see, on the left is what I started with, and then on the right is after this session. I've actually got a knife shape going on there. Almost looks like a really heavy butter knife. So now I'm going to put it into the forge handle first and leave it in there for a long time to get it as hot as possible because it's time for the twist. You want to get the blade shape in there before the twist so you don't mess up the twist when you're trying to hammer in that bubble. I drop it in my vise, and this is just a cheap Harbor Freight vise, but it'll do the trick. I've secured it to some wood that was scraps offcuts from my deck, so it's got some good weight on it, and I'm standing on it. Put an adjustable wrench on there, and I start to turn. And I wish it was a little bit heavier, because you can see I kind of lose control of the base there. I need to stand on it and push my weight on it a good bit. But I did get the twist in there and all around. Ideally, you should do this steady, smooth, in one motion. But I hopefully will soon weld on another piece onto this wrench, so it becomes a much better twisting wrench. But you can see the stress fractures really became apparent here, and in that twist, there's a whole lot of cracks and pivots, and a lot of the energy of that twist, instead of going into a nice clean twist like my first knife, it went to a point right between the handle and the blade where it almost failed. It almost completely came apart. But I think it's kind of interesting. These are medium carbon, so they're not going to be great knives. They're not going to hold an edge. They're not going to harden up. So this is really just a piece of art and practice. And as a piece of art, I think this shows what the railroad spike is. It is a piece of functional steel that has done a duty, for 50, maybe 100 years. Who knows how long these things live, how long this thing lived a life before my wife found it in an antique store and bought it for me to forge with. But you can see that it almost failed there in the center, right at the transition between the twist and the blade. And as I go to grind this, you can see on the blade, you can see some of the cracks there. It looks like almost like a scaled surface. That's not just forge scale. That's actual stress fractures running almost all the way through the blade. And when I grind this out, you can really see. Took on a good bend with a good amount of stress fracture. So here I'm using an angle grinder with a wire wheel to clean up all that forge scale and oxidization and get down to the shiny metal, as shiny as you can get with this steel. But now it's really clearing up those cracks. I think it's pretty neat actually. Some more cleanup, trying to get the blade some. This is preparation to go into grinding. Anything you can take off here that you will get, that wire will get down to the pits and clean up those pits that the grind is not going to get until you really grind on it. So here I'm on my Buck Tool 2x42 grinder. I think I have a 60 grit belt on there right now. I'm cleaning up the spine, and now I'm cleaning up the sides of the blade. I'm just trying to take off as much of that pitting and forge scale as possible. It's going to be rough, so you're going to leave some of that in there, but that's part of the aesthetic of a forged knife. It looks too much like stock removal if you don't leave a few of those beauty marks in there. Now you can see at the bottom, larger wheel here is open, and you can use that as a contact wheel. And I've taken the guard, since after this video, I've taken the guard off the top, so you can use the small wheel as a contact wheel as well. And now I'm just using a circular file to work a choil in there, so I have a place to start the actual double grind, and that segregates basically the blade, the sharp blade, from the picasso, the area between the handle and the blade that is not sharpened. And now I'm holding the blade up and drawing it across, one swipe each way, so I have even amounts of material taken out of the sides of the knife. I gotta say, grinding the bevel is probably the hardest skill, and I'm still learning. I'm still not great at it, but basically you start at like a 45-degree angle to your blade. Also, I've marked what bevel I wanted with a marker on here, and I'm just grinding away at a 45-degree angle and gradually lowering the ink down. Grind that Scandinavian grind that I want. That's the type of grind that I'm using. Well, at least I'm trying to grind here. This is the first time I've ever done a Scandi grind, so it's just my first attempt at it. I think it turned out pretty good, especially for an amateur. On the first railroad spike, I started trying to do this, and then changed my angle, and then it just started taking away so much material. It was a good learning experience, but I did not like the grind of that first knife. And I like this grind a lot better, even though it just shows off those stress fracture cracks. But that's okay. That just shows the long life that this thing had before it got into my hands. And as a piece of art, I think I do but I've got a bucket of water here. You can see when I bend down, I'm dipping that bucket. So I'm trying to keep the blade cool. I don't want it getting too hot in my hands. It's not really important for this because it's medium carbon, so I'm not going to blow any heat treat or tempering, hardening, any of that. But it's just a good practice to get into to not use gloves when you're doing this, so you can feel if the knife's getting too hot, and then dip it in your bucket of water to ensure you don't spoil your heat treat. Later on, I was practicing on just a bar of mild steel I used to put my anvil down, and I burned up the tip 2 or 3 times just by producing too much heat. You can see there's a little yellow in the blade there. That's a little bit of the heat changing it to a straw temperature. So that's actually a good tempering temperature, but you don't want to do that and grind. So I should have been dipping it more often. But I think it cleaned up pretty good. The bevel looked pretty good. So thank you. Please like, subscribe, and comment all that YouTube stuff if you want to keep seeing my forging journey.